Hello, St. Peter's, and welcome back. It is our first chapter book edition in the library of 2021. Happy New Year. Can you believe? Here we are. It's the middle of the school year. It's a brand new year. We had a virtual week this week with our students testing. Now we get to come back on Monday, full force, just as we were before Thanksgiving. And I can't wait to see so many of you back again. Some of you are still virtual. Here I am, ready to read to you so that you can read right along with us the same stories I'm doing at school as well. All right, my friends are here. Ralph, Magic Monkey, Daisy, of course our Pig of Joy with her Jar of Joy. So we will still be spreading some joy throughout this year. 2021, here we are. So I decided I would read to you a classic story that I enjoyed when I was your age. I'm going to share it with you today. We finished up Humphrey, so if you missed a couple videos, go back and check it out. I finished The World According to Humphrey. He took us all the way through Christmas. So today we're starting a new chapter book by one of my favorite authors, Judy Blume. It's called Tales of a Fourth Grade Nothing. Some of you are in fourth grade, I know, so you'll really relate. And even if you're in third grade, second grade, or fifth grade or older, I think you'll still really enjoy a lot of the things that our friend here does. He has a funny name as well. We're going to find out all about him in just a minute. So here we go. Tales of a Fourth Grade Nothing by Judy Blume, Chapter 1. Chapter 1 is called The Big Winner. I won dribble at Jimmy Fargo's birthday party. All the other guys got to take home goldfish in little plastic bags. I won him because I guessed there were 348 jelly beans in Mrs. Fargo's jar. Really, there were 423, she told us later. Still, my guess was closest. Peter Warren Hatcher is the big winner, Mrs. Fargo announced. At first, I felt bad that I didn't get a goldfish, too. Then, Jimmy handed me a glass bowl. Inside, there was some water and 3 rocks. A tiny green turtle was sleeping on the biggest rock. All the other guys looked at their goldfish. I knew that they were thinking they wished they would have tiny green turtles, too. I named my turtle Dribble while I was walking home from Jimmy's party. I live at 25 West 68th Street. It's an old apartment building, but it's got one of the best elevators in New York City. There are mirrors all around. You can see yourself from every angle. There's a soft, cushioned bench to sit on if you're too tired to stand. The elevator operator's name is Henry Bevelheimer. He lets us call him Henry because Bevelheimer's very hard to say. Our apartment's on the 12th floor, but I don't have to tell Henry. He already knows. He knows everybody in the building. He's that smart. He even knows I'm 9 and in 4th grade. I showed him Dribble right away. I won him at a birthday party, I said. Henry smiled. Your mother's going to be surprised. Henry was right. My mother was really surprised. Her mouth opened when I said, "Just look at what I won at Jimmy Fargo's birthday party." I held up my tiny green turtle. I've already named him Dribble. Isn't that a great name for a turtle? My mother made a face. I don't like the way he smells, she said. What do you mean? I asked. I put my nose right down close to him. I didn't smell anything but turtle. So Dribble smells like turtle, I thought. Well, he's supposed to. That's what he is. And I'm not going to take care of him either, my mother added. Of course you're not, I told her. He's my turtle, and I'm the one who's going to take care of him. You're going to change his water and clean out his bowl and feed him and all of that? She asked. Yes, I said, and even more, I'm going to see to it that he's happy. This time my mother made a funny noise, like a groan. Huh. I went into my bedroom. I put Dribble on top of my dresser. I tried to pet him and tell him he would be happy living with me. But it isn't easy to pet a turtle. They aren't soft and furry, and they don't lick you or anything. Still, I had my very own pet at last. Later, when I sat down at the dinner table, my mother said, "I smell turtle. Peter, go and scrub your hands." Some people might think that my mother is my biggest problem. She doesn't like turtles, and she's always telling me to scrub my hands. That doesn't mean just run them underwater. Scrub means I'm supposed to use soap and rub my hands together. Then I've got to rinse and dry them. I ought to know by now. I've heard it enough. But my mother isn't my biggest problem. Neither is my father. He spends a lot of time watching commercials on TV. That's because he's in the advertising business. These days, his favorite commercial is one about Juicy O. He wrote it himself. And the president of Juicy O Company liked it so much, he sent my father a whole crate of Juicy O for our family to drink. It tastes like a combination of oranges, pineapples, grapefruits, pears, and bananas. And if you want to know the truth, I'm getting pretty sick of drinking it. But Juicy O isn't my biggest problem either. My biggest problem is my brother, Farley Drexel Hatcher. He's 2.5 years old. Everybody calls him Fudge. I feel sorry for him, and he's going to grow up with a name like Fudge. But I don't say a word. It's none of my business. Fudge is always in my way. He messes up everything he sees. And when he gets mad, he throws himself flat on the floor and he screams. And he kicks. And he bangs his fists. The only time I really like him is when he's sleeping. He sucks 4 fingers on his left hand and makes a slurping noise. When Fudge saw Dribble, he said, "Oh, see!" And I said, "That's my turtle, get it? Mine. You don't touch him." Fudge said, "No touch." Then he laughed like crazy. Chapter 2, Mr. and Mrs. Juicy O. One night, my father came home from the office, all excited. He told us Mr. and Mrs. Yarby were coming to New York. He's the president of the Juicy O Company. He lives in Chicago. I wondered if he'd bring my father another crate of Juicy O. If he did, I'd probably be drinking it for the rest of my life. Just thinking about it was enough to make my stomach hurt. My father said he invited Mr. and Mrs. Yarby to stay with us. My mother wanted to know why they couldn't stay at a hotel like most people who come to New York. My father said they could, but he didn't want them to. He thought they'd be more comfortable staying with us. My mother said that was about the silliest thing she'd ever heard. But she fixed up Fudge's bedroom for our guest. She put fancy sheets and a brand new blanket on the hide-a-bed. That's a sofa that opens up into a bed at night. It's in Fudge's room because that used to be our den. Before he was born, we watched TV in there, and lots of times Grandma slept over on the hide-a-bed. Now we watch TV right in the living room, and Grandma doesn't sleep over very often. My mother moved Fudge's crib into my room. Oh, he's going to get a regular bed when he's 3, my mother says. There are a lot of reasons I don't like to sleep in the same room as Fudge. I found that out 2 months ago when my bedroom was being painted. I had to sleep in Fudge's room for 3 nights because the paint smell was making me cough. For one thing, he talks in his sleep. And if a person didn't know better, a person could get scared. Another thing is that slurping noise he makes. It's true that I like to hear it when I'm awake, but when I'm trying to fall asleep, I like things very quiet. When I complained about having to sleep with Fudge, my mother said, "It's just for 2 nights, Peter." "I'll sleep in the living room," I suggested, "on the sofa, or even in a chair." "No," my mother said. You will sleep in your bedroom in your own bed. There was no point in arguing. Mom wasn't going to change her mind. She spent the day in the kitchen. She really cooked up a storm. She used so many pots and pans, Fudge didn't have any left to bang together. And that's one of his favorite pastimes, banging pots and pans together. A person can get an awful headache listening to that racket. Right after lunch, my mother opened up the dinner table. We don't have a separate dining room. When we have company for dinner, we eat in one end of the living room. When Mom finished setting the table, she put a silver bowl filled with flowers right in the middle. I said, "Hey, Mom, it looks like you're expecting the president or something." "Very funny, Peter," my mother answered. Sometimes my mother laughs like crazy at my jokes. Other times she pretends not to get them. And then there are times when I know she gets them, but she doesn't seem to like them. This was one of those times. So I decided no more jokes until after dinner. I went to Jimmy Fargo's for the afternoon. I came home at 4 o'clock. I found my mother standing over the dinner table mumbling. Fudge was on the floor playing with my father's socks. I'm not sure why he likes socks so much, but if you give him a few pairs, he'll play quietly for an hour. I said, "Hi, Mom, I'm home." "I'm missing 2 flowers," my mother said. I don't know how she noticed that 2 flowers were missing from her silver bowl, but there were at least a dozen of them left. But sure enough, when I checked, I saw 2 stems with nothing on them. "Don't look at me," I said. "What would I do with 2 measly flowers?" So we both looked at Fudge. "Did you take Mommy's pretty flowers?" I asked him. "No take," Fudge said. He was chewing on something. "What's in your mouth?" my mother asked. Fudge didn't answer. "Show Mommy." "No show," Fudge said. "Oh, yes." My mother picked him up and forced his mouth open. She fished out a rose petal. "What did you do with Mommy's flowers?" She raised her voice. She was really getting upset. Fudge laughed. "Tell Mommy." "Yum," Fudge said. "Yummy, yummy, yummy." "Oh, no," my mother cried, rushing to the telephone. She called Dr. Cone. She told him that Fudge ate 2 flowers. Dr. Cone must have asked what kind, because my mother said, "Roses, I think, but I can't be sure. One might have been a daisy." There was a long pause while my mother listened to whatever Dr. Cone had to say. Then Mom said, "Thank you, Dr. Cone." She hung up. "No more flowers," she told Fudge. "You understand?" "No more," Fudge repeated. "No more, no more, no more." My mother gave him a spoonful of peppermint-flavored medicine, the kind I take when I have stomach pains. Then she carried Fudge off to have his bath. Leave it to my brother to eat flowers. I wondered how they tasted. Maybe they're delicious and I don't know it because I've never tasted one, I thought. I decided to find out. I picked off 1 petal from a pink rose. I put it in my mouth and tried to chew it up. But I couldn't do it. It tasted awful. Ugh, I spit it out in the garbage. Well, at least now I knew I wasn't missing anything great. Well, Fudge ate his supper in the kitchen before our company arrived. While he was eating, I heard my mother remind him, "Fudgy's going to be a good boy tonight. Very good for Daddy's friends." "Good," Fudge said. "Good boy." "That's right," my mother told him. I changed and scrubbed up while Fudge finished his supper. I was going to eat with the company. Being 9 has its advantages. My mother was all dressed up by the time my father got home with the Yarbies. You'd never have guessed that Mom spent most of the day in the kitchen. You'd also never have guessed that Fudge ate 2 flowers. He was feeling fine. He even smelled nice, like baby powder. Mrs. Yarby picked him up right away. I knew she would. She looked like a grandmother. That type always makes a big deal out of Fudge. She walked into the living room cuddling him. Then she sat down on the sofa and bounced Fudge around on her lap. Isn't he the cutest little baby? Mrs. Yarby said. I just love babies. She gave him a big kiss on the top of his head. I kept waiting for somebody to tell her Fudge was no baby, but no one did. My father carried the Yarby suitcase into Fudge's room. When he came back, he introduced me to our company. This is our older son, Peter, he said to the Yarbys. I'm 9 and in 4th grade, I told them. How do, Peter? Mr. Yarby said. Mrs. Yarby just gave me a nod. She was still busy with Fudge. I have a surprise for this dear little boy, she said. It's in my suitcase. Should I go get it? Yes, Fudge shouted. Go get, go get. Mrs. Yarby laughed, as if that was the best joke she ever heard. I'll be right back, she told Fudge. She put him down and ran off to find her suitcase. She came back carrying a present tied up with a red ribbon. Ooh, Fudge cried, opening his eyes wide. Goody! He clapped his hands. Mrs. Yarby helped him unwrap his surprise. It was a wind-up train that made a lot of noise. Every time it bumped into something, it turned around and went the other way. Fudge liked it a lot. He likes anything noisy. I said, That's a nice train. Mrs. Yarby turned to me. Oh, I have something for you, too. Peter, I reminded her. My name is Peter. Yes, well, I'll go get it. Mrs. Yarby left the room again. This time she came back with a flat package. It was wrapped up too, red ribbon and all. She handed it to me. Fudge stopped playing with his train long enough to come over and see what I got. I took off the paper very carefully in case my mother wanted to save it, and also to show Mrs. Yarby that I'm a lot more careful about things than my brother. I'm not sure she noticed. My present turned out to be a picture dictionary. The kind I liked when I was about 4 years old. My old one is in Fudge's bookcase now. I don't know much about big boys, Mrs. Yarby said, so the lady in the store said a nice book would be a good idea. A nice book would have been a good idea, I thought, but a picture dictionary, that's for babies. I've had my own regular dictionary since I was 8, but I knew I had to be polite, so I said, Thank you very much, it's just what I've always wanted. Oh, I'm so glad, Mrs. Yarby said. She let out a long sigh and sat back on the sofa. My father offered the Yarbys a drink. Good idea, Mr. Yarby said. What'll it be? My father asked. What'll it be? Mr. Yarby repeated, laughing. What do you think, Hatcher? It'll be Juicy-O. That's all we ever drink. Good for your health. Mr. Yarby pounded his chest. Of course, my father said, like he knew it all along. Juicy-O for everyone. My father told my mother. She went into the kitchen to get it. While my father and Mr. Yarby were discussing Juicy-O, Fudge disappeared. Just as my mother served everyone a glass of Mr. Yarby's favorite drink, he came back. He was carrying a book, my old worn-out picture dictionary, the same as the one the Yarbys just gave me. See, Fudge said, climbing up on Mrs. Yarby's lap. See, book. I wanted to vanish. I think my mother and father did too. See, book. Now Fudge held it up over his head. I can use another one, I explained. I really can. That old one is falling apart. I tried to laugh. It's returnable, Mrs. Yarby said. It's silly to keep it if you already have one. She sounded insulted, like it was my fault she brought me something I already had. Mine, Fudge said. He closed the book and held it tight against his chest. Mine, mine, mine. It's the thought that counts, my mother said. It was so nice of you to think of our boys. Then she turned to Fudge. Put the book away now, Fudgy. Isn't it Fudgy's bedtime? My father hinted. Oh, yes, I think it is, my mother said, scooping him up. Say good night, Fudgy. Good night, Fudgy, my brother said, waving at us. Fudge was supposed to fall asleep before we sat down to dinner. But just in case, my mother put a million little toys in his crib to keep him busy. I don't know who my mother thought she was fooling, because we all know that Fudge can climb out of his crib any old time he wants to. He stayed away until we were in the middle of our roast beef. Then he came in, carrying Dribble's bowl. He walked right up to Mrs. Yarby. He thought she was his new friend. "See," he said, holding Dribble under her nose. "See, Dribble." Mrs. Yarby shrieked, "Oh, I can't stand reptiles. Get that thing away from me." Fudge looked disappointed, so he showed Dribble to Mr. Yarby. "See," he said. "Hatcher," Mr. Yarby boomed. "Make him get that thing out of here." I wondered why Mr. Yarby called my father Hatcher. Didn't he know his first name was Warren? And I didn't like the way Mr. and Mrs. Yarby both called Dribble a thing. I jumped up. "Give him to me," I told Fudge. I took Dribble and his bowl and marched him into my room. I inspected my turtle all over. He seemed all right. I didn't want to make a big scene in front of our company, but I was mad. I mean, really mad. That kid knows he's not allowed to touch my turtle. "Peter," my father called, "come and finish your dinner." When I got back to the table, I heard Mrs. Yarby saying, "It must be interesting to have children. We never had any ourselves." "Oh, but if we did," Mr. Yarby told my father, "we'd teach them some manners. I'm a firm believer in old-fashioned good manners." "So are we, Howard," my father said in a weak voice. I thought Mr. Yarby had a lot of nerve to hint that we had no manners. Didn't I pretend to like their dumb old picture-read dictionary? If that isn't good manners, then I don't know what is. My mother excused herself and carried Fudge back to my room. I guess she put him into his crib again. I hope she told him to keep his hands off my things. We didn't hear from him again until dessert. Just as my mother was pouring the coffee, he ran in, wearing my rubber gorilla mask from last Halloween. It was a very real-looking mask. I guess that's why Mrs. Yarby screamed so loud. If she hadn't made so much noise, my mother probably wouldn't have spilled the coffee all over the floor. My father grabbed Fudge and pulled the gorilla mask off of him. "That's not funny, Fudge," he said. "Funny," Fudge laughed. "Funny, funny, funny, Fudgy." "Yes, sir, Hatcher," Mr. Yarby said. "Old-fashioned manners." By that time, I'm sure my father was sorry the Yarbys weren't staying at a hotel. I finally got to bed at 10. Fudge was in his crib slurping away. I thought I'd never fall asleep. But I guess I did. I woke up once when Fudge started babbling. He said, "Booba habashi," whatever that means. I didn't even get scared. I whispered, "Shut up." And he did. Early the next morning, I felt something funny on my arm. At first, I didn't wake up. I just felt this little tickle. I thought it was part of my dream. But then I had the feeling somebody was staring at me. So I opened my eyes. Fudge was standing over me, and Dribble was crawling around on my arm. I guess Fudge could tell I was ready to kill him, because he bent down and kissed me. That's what he does when my mother's angry at him. He thinks nobody can resist him when he makes himself so lovable. And a lot of times it works with my mother, but not with me. I jumped up, put Dribble back into his bowl, and smacked Fudge on his backside. Hard. He hollered. My father came running into the room. He was still in his pajamas. He whispered, "What's going on in here?" I pointed at Fudge, and he pointed at me. My father picked up my brother and carried him off. "Go back to sleep, Peter," he said. "It's only 6 o'clock in the morning." I fell asleep for another hour and then woke up to an awful noise. It was Fudge playing with his new train. It woke up everybody, including the Yarbys. But this time, there was nobody they could blame. They were the ones who gave Fudge the train in the first place. Breakfast was a very quiet affair. Nobody had much to say. Mr. Yarby drank 2 glasses of Juicio. Then he told my father that he and Mrs. Yarby had their suitcases packed. They were leaving for a hotel as soon as breakfast was over. My father said he understood, that the apartment was too small for so many people. My mother didn't say anything. When Mr. Yarby went into Fudge's bedroom to pick up his suitcase, his voice boomed. "Hatcher!" My father ran toward the bedroom. My mother and Mrs. Yarby followed him. I followed them. When he got there, we saw Fudge sitting on the Yarby's suitcase. He had decorated it with about 100 green stamps, the kind my mother gets at the supermarket. "See," Fudge said. "See, pretty." He laughed. Nobody else did. Then he licked the last green stamp and stuck it right in the middle of the suitcase. "All gone," Fudge sang, holding up his hands. It took my mother half an hour to peel off her trading stamps and clean up the Yarby suitcase. The next week, my father came home from the office and collected all the cans of Juicio in our house. He dumped them into the garbage. My mother felt bad that my father had lost such an important account. But my father told her not to worry. Juicio wasn't selling very well at the stores. Nobody seems to like the combination of oranges, grapefruits, pineapples, pears, and bananas. "You know, Dad," I said, "I only drank Juicio to be polite. I really hated it." "You know something funny, Peter," my father said. "I thought it was pretty bad myself." So that's a little introduction into Peter and Fudge, his brother with a funny name, and their family. We're going to meet their dog next time, and we'll even go to school with Peter eventually. It's just a fun story. If you can see the cover there, you see Fudge running with the turtle. He's always doing something to be a pain to Peter. I bet some of you might have little brothers or sisters running around that you might feel the same way. That's why I like that book, something we can all relate to. Okay, are you ready to spread some joy? Let's do it. The first joy of our chapter edition for 2021. We decided, Joy and I, that this year we're going to try to bring even more joy. So if you have any good ideas for the joy jar, put it in the comments and I will add it to the jar. I'll even put your name on it so that we can share whose great idea it was. Oh, this one is really fun. And it's the weekend, so you should have some extra time to call someone you love. Call someone you love. There are so many people, our family and friends, that we haven't been able to see for a long time because we can't really travel. We have to stay safe within our own homes. So calling someone you love would really put a smile on their face. And it will put a smile on your face as well, because you'll get to talk to someone that you have been missing, right? What a great way to spread some joy. We will go home and call someone that we love as well. So until next week, when we continue our adventures with Peter and Fudge, stay safe, have a wonderful weekend, and don't forget to keep spreading your joy.